What happens when faith, instead of guiding mankind, blinds him? Tonight, we unravel the hidden cost of surrendering reason at the altar of belief, the chains that faith forges, not of iron, but of devotion. This is not the story of gods, but of men who learn to rule in their name. Faith, it is the sweet nectar that sustains mankind when reason falters. It whispers comfort in the dark, gives hope to the suffering, and promises justice where none exists. Without faith, empires would crumble in despair, armies would refuse to march, and the poor would rise in rebellion. Faith, you see, is not merely belief in the unseen. It is the lifeblood of order itself. But when faith is allowed to stand above reason, when men accept without question what they are told, the very strength that sustains them becomes the chain that enslaves them. Consider the man who kneels, head bowed, lips trembling in prayer. To him faith is salvation, a shield against despair. But to the ruler who watches him, that same faith is an instrument of command. For the man who trusts blindly will not resist. He will obey. He will fight, bleed, and even die, not for truth, but for the illusion of truth. The line between noble faith and blind faith is thinner than a razor's edge, and once crossed, it transforms belief into bondage. Reason, on the other hand, is the rebel child. Reason demands evidence, proof, logic. It questions, it doubts, it refuses to kneel without cause. To rulers, reason is dangerous, for reason strips away the veil of sacred lies. A man who thinks will see through the false prophet, the corrupt priest, the cunning prince. Such a man is harder to control, for he asks, why, and nothing threatens power more than the question why. Yet most men fear reason more than they fear lies. Reason demands effort, study, and courage. Faith requires only surrender. And so, the masses choose faith, for it is easier to be told what to believe than to endure the labor of thinking. Here lies the great paradox. The very tool that could free them, reason, is abandoned, while faith, meant to elevate them, is corrupted into a mechanism of obedience. Throughout history, the struggle between faith and reason has determined the fate of nations. Look upon the Middle Ages, when kings ruled by divine right. Their subjects were taught not to question, for the crown was said to be placed upon their heads by the hand of God himself. Was it reason that kept the peasants bowing in the mud? No, it was faith. Faith that their suffering was ordained. Faith that their obedience was holy. And so, generation after generation, labored, starved, and died, never daring to ask whether the throne was built on justice or on lies. Observe the priests, who once sold indulgences, papers promising forgiveness in exchange for coin. To the faithful, this seemed a sacred exchange, a bridge to heaven itself. But what did reason say? Reason saw corruption, greed, manipulation. Yet those who dared to speak reason were silenced, branded heretics, burned alive so that others might learn the price of questioning. And still, the masses clung to their blind faith, too afraid, too docile, too trusting. Even in the modern age, the duel between faith and reason has not ended. Politicians drape themselves in holy language, invoking God to justify wars, policies, and crimes. They know well that reasoned arguments may be challenged, debated, or disproved, but cloak a decision in divine will, and suddenly it becomes untouchable. The citizen, robbed of reason, bows willingly, thinking obedience is righteousness, when in truth it is simply submission. The Machiavellian mind sees this clearly. He knows that faith, once divorced from reason, becomes the perfect weapon. With it, a cunning man may rule more securely than with soldiers or laws. For laws may be broken, soldiers may rebel, but a man convinced that obedience is sacred will chain himself more tightly than any tyrant ever could. And so, the art of ruling is not merely to inspire faith, but to blind it, to strip it of reason, to render it absolute and unquestioned. Do not think this struggle is distant, locked away in dusty histories. No, it plays out every day, in pulpits, in parliaments, in schools, in the endless parade of voices demanding trust without proof. Faith versus reason is not merely a philosophical contest. It is a battle for your mind, your freedom, your very soul. Each time you accept without question, you tilt the balance toward servitude. Each time you doubt, you seize a fragment of liberty. This then is the first truth of our tale. Faith is a double-edged sword. Wielded with reason, it uplifts. Wielded without reason, it enslaves. And in this dangerous interplay, rulers, priests, and manipulators find their greatest advantage. For the blind believer is not a man, he is a tool, ready to be used, discarded, or sacrificed at will. And so long as men prefer the comfort of unquestioned faith to the burden of reason, they shall remain willing participants in their own subjugation. To rule men is not to command their bodies, but to command their minds. Armies may be vast, fortresses may be strong, but nothing compares to the power of belief. For when the masses believe, they obey not reluctantly, but eagerly. They do not merely submit to the will of their masters, they defend it, justify it, and even kill for it. And all of this is achieved not through force, but through the careful manipulation of faith. The masses are not ruled by reason. Reason is cold, sharp, and often uncomfortable. The masses crave warmth, unity, and purpose. They seek stories that elevate them, myth that give their suffering meaning, and leaders who cloak themselves in righteousness. It is here that the cunning ruler strikes. He gives the people not truth, but a carefully woven illusion. He clothes ambition in the language of virtue, greed in the guise of divine mission, conquest in the mask of holy duty. The people, desperate for meaning, swallow it whole. Look at history, and you will see this pattern unfold endlessly. The Roman emperors declared themselves God. Did their subjects question? Rarely. Instead they cheered, worshipped, and paid tribute, convinced that kneeling before a man was equal to kneeling before heaven. Later, kings crowned themselves with divine right. Their wars of expansion were called holy, their taxes framed as sacred duty. The people were told that to resist their king was to resist God himself. And so, rebellion was not just treason, but blasphemy, a crime punishable not only by law but by damnation. Such is the brilliance of manipulation. When men believe they fight for the eternal, they will ignore the chains binding them in the present. The masses are most easily ruled when they are united by fear and guided by hope. Fear without hope leads to despair, and hope without fear breeds complacency. But balance them perfectly, and you create a population, both obedient and loyal. The priest warns of hellfire, and the ruler promises paradise, if only the people obey. Disobedience means eternal torment, obedience means eternal reward. Who would dare to choose reason, when faith, sweetened by promise, and sharpened by fear, offers such simple clarity? Observe the Crusades, when ordinary men left their homes to fight in distant lands they barely understood. Why did they march? Not for gold, not for land, not for reason. They marched because they were told God commanded it. They believed they fought for heaven itself. Yet who profited? The nobles, the monarchs, the papacy. The masses bled, starved, and died, while the powerful gained wealth and glory. Manipulation dressed as divine duty turned multitudes into willing pawns. In the art of manipulation, symbols are more potent than laws. A flag, a holy text, a relic, these can move armies more swiftly than whips or threats. The wise ruler surrounds himself with sacred symbols, for they carry authority that transcends reason. The people do not ask whether the relic is genuine, or the scripture corrupted. They only see what they are told to see, and once the symbol is sanctified, it becomes a weapon sharper than steel. Even in our modern age, manipulation thrives. Politicians drape themselves in faith, speaking of destiny, divine providence, or sacred duty. Wars are no longer called battles for resources or power, but crusades for freedom, for justice, for God. Citizens are told that obedience is patriotism, that dissent is betrayal, and the masses, eager to belong, eager to feel righteous, obey. They wave flags, chant prayers, and defend causes they do not fully understand, convinced they are agents of virtue, when in truth, they are instruments of power. The masses can be manipulated not only by faith in gods, but by faith in ideas. Ideologies once declared sacred command the same obedience as religion. Men will denounce their neighbors, betray their families, and slaughter strangers, all for the glory of an abstract belief. Blind faith in doctrine functions no differently than blind faith in divinity. Both serve to bind men together, under a banner not of reason, but of unquestioned loyalty. The manipulator's genius lies not in forcing belief, but in offering it freely. He does not demand worship, he inspires it. He does not compel loyalty, he nurtures it. The masses must believe they chose their devotion, for chosen chains are the strongest of all. They will defend the very illusions that enslave them, because they imagine those illusions to be their own truth. Thus, manipulation becomes invisible, hidden beneath layers of sincerity and passion. Faith, when stripped of reason, becomes the perfect tool for mass control. A single voice, wrapped in authority, can direct multitudes as easily as a shepherd guides sheep. And the sheep, blinded by devotion, will not recognize the hand that leads them to slaughter. They will follow chanting, convinced they march toward salvation, even as they walk willingly into ruin. Loyalty, in its purest form, is a virtue. It binds comrades, sustains families, fortifies kingdoms. But blind loyalty, the kind born not of reason, but of unexamined faith, is no virtue at all. It is the most dangerous form of submission, for it demands sacrifice without question, and obedience without thought. It is a bargain where the master takes everything, and the servant in his devotion gives away even his freedom to ask why. The consequences of blind loyalty are written across the pages of history, in blood and ash. Armies slaughtered in wars that served no justice, peasants crushed beneath taxes that funded nothing but their rulers' vanity, men and women silenced, tortured, or burned because they refused to chant the approved words of the mob. Always the masses believed they were serving a cause greater than themselves. Always they thought their suffering was noble, their deaths meaningful. Yet in the end the cause belonged not to them, but to those who manipulated their loyalty. When a ruler secures blind loyalty, he no longer governs with wisdom or justice. He governs with indulgence, for he knows his subjects will defend him, regardless of his crime. A loyal subject will excuse corruption, justify cruelty, and celebrate oppression, if he believes it serves the master he adores. The more blind the loyalty, the more dangerous the ruler becomes, for unchecked devotion grants him the license to act without restraint. He may squander resources, plunge nations into ruin, or massacre thousands, and still the blind loyalist will cheer, convinced that his suffering is part of some divine or historic destiny. Observe the empires that rose and fell on the altar of loyalty. In Rome, legions swore blind allegiance to emperors, who debased themselves in madness. Nero played his fiddle as the city burned, and still his followers swore he was chosen by the gods. In the Middle Ages, kings demanded loyalty, under the claim of divine right, and entire generations bowed in silence, living and dying, without questioning whether the crown was truly heaven's gift, or simply a gilded theft. Blind loyalty transformed men into willing prisoners, shackled not by chains of iron, but by chains of devotion. The consequence is not merely political, it corrodes the soul of the loyalist himself. When a man obeys without question, he slowly loses the capacity to think, to doubt, to resist. He becomes less than human, reduced to a tool wielded by another's hand. His actions are no longer his own, his victories are not his triumphs, his sacrifices not his choice. He marches when told, kneels when commanded, and praises when ordered, until his very identity dissolves into the will of the one he serves. And yet, the tragedy is that the loyalist believes himself virtuous. He sees his submission as noble, his obedience as righteousness. He confuses servitude with honor. But what honor lies in dying for another man's ambition? What righteousness is found in murdering for another man's greed? The loyalist does not ask, because he has been taught that questioning is betrayal. He calls his silence strength, his blindness faith, his slavery loyalty, and thus, he chains himself while believing he is free. The rulers who exploit this loyalty understand well that the most effective chains are invisible. They do not demand obedience through fear alone. They reward loyalty with identity, with belonging, with the illusion of purpose. The soldier believes he is a hero, the peasant believes he is a servant of God, the citizen believes he is defending his homeland. And yet, in truth, they are defending not their faith, nor their family, nor their freedom, but the ambitions of those who sit above them, cloaked in power. Blind loyalty does not only destroy the servant, it destroys entire society. A people that obey without question allows corruption to thrive unchecked. They permit injustice to spread, tyranny to harden, cruelty to become normal. They may see their neighbors imprisoned unjustly, but they remain silent, trusting the ruler. They may watch their resources stolen, their children sent to die in pointless wars, their land ruined by greed, but they defend it, convinced it is necessary. Blind loyalty teaches them to see decay and call it glory, to witness chains and call it freedom. Consider how revolutions often begin. It is not reason that fuels them, but the eventual collapse of blind loyalty.
The people serve faithfully, generation after generation, until finally the weight of suffering can no longer be hidden behind words of faith and duty. At last they see that their devotion has been squandered, their sacrifices stolen, but by then it is too late. Kingdoms lie in ruins, cultures shattered, lives lost, all because men surrendered reason and chose loyalty without. In the end, blind loyalty extracts the highest price. It devours the very things it claims to protect. Families are torn apart in wars fought for masters they never met. Communities collapse under burdens imposed by rulers they never questioned. Nations fall because their people refuse to doubt, refuse to resist, refuse to think. The loyalist may believe he dies for honor, but in truth he dies for another man's gain, another man's vision, another man's life. Machiavelli understood what few dared to admit, that men are not guided by lofty ideals, but by their fears, their desires, and above all their illusions. He saw clearly that power belongs not to the strongest, nor even to the wisest, but to the one who understands belief as a tool. And so he offered a lesson: do not despise faith, but learn how to wield it. For while blind faith destroys those who follow, it empowers the one who knows how to bend it to his will. To rule effectively, one must not seek to abolish faith. That would be folly. Men cannot live without belief. It is the food of their souls. Strip them of faith entirely, and they will starve in despair. The ruler must instead feed them carefully, providing just enough faith to sustain loyalty, but always mixed with fear to enforce obedience. This balance, Machiavelli taught, is the true art of governance. For fear ensures order, while faith ensures devotion. Together they forge a chain far stronger than iron. Machiavelli advised that appearances matter more than reality. A ruler need not be truly pious, but he must seem pious. He need not be truly virtuous, but he must appear virtuous. For the masses do not see what a ruler is, only what he presents. They look upon the surface and take it for truth. If the prince speaks of God, of justice, of destiny, they believe. They will not peer behind the mask. They do not wish to. Thus the lesson is clear. Reality may be corrupt, but the illusion of faith will sanctify it in the eyes of the people. This is why blind faith, though deadly for the masses, is priceless for the ambitious. The clever ruler understands that faith is the stage upon which he performs. His subjects, hungry for meaning, are his audience. They applaud not reason, but spectacle, and so he gives them spectacle, ceremonies, rituals, proclamations draped in divine authority. He may be ruthless in secret, but publicly he bows his head, lifts his eyes to heaven, and lets the people see what they crave. They worship him not for what he is, but for the illusions he creates. The lesson of Machiavelli is that morality, when divorced from necessity, is weak. A ruler who clings to pure virtue will be devoured by wolves who are willing to stain their hands. But a ruler who cloaks ruthlessness in the garment of faith will reign unchallenged. For the people forgive cruelty when they believe it is sacred. They forgive lies when they believe them divine. They forgive injustice when they believe it ordained. Thus power is not seized by brute force alone, but by mastering the art of appearing holy while acting with cold calculation. Look at the rulers who endured while others fell. They were not always the most just, nor the most noble, but they were the most skilled at weaving illusions. They turned faith into armor, shielding their ambition behind the language of righteousness. Even when they acted with cruelty, their subjects defended them, convinced they served a higher cause, and those who questioned, they were silenced by the mob itself. Loyalists, who attacked dissenters not for reason, but for devotion. This is the genius of wielding faith. The people police themselves, destroying the very voices that might awaken them. Machiavelli's lesson was not written for the common man. It was written for the prince, the ruler, the one who seeks power and survival above all. He warned that relying on love alone is dangerous, for love is fickle and fleeting, but fear when coupled with belief is enduring. The loyal subject may waver in affection, but if he fears disobedience, and believes obedience is holy, he will remain steadfast. Fear without faith breeds hatred, and faith without fear breeds weakness. But together they form the foundation of unshakable rule. The masses often imagine they are free when they are most enslaved. They believe their loyalty is chosen, their faith authentic. But Machiavelli saw through this illusion. He knew that choice is shaped by manipulation, that devotion is engineered by spectacle. The ruler offers the people the illusion of dignity in their servitude, and they embrace it willingly. They march into battle, they pay their taxes, they sing their hymns, all convinced that they are actors in a grand divine story. In truth, They are pieces on the chessboard, moved at the ruler's pleasure. And yet, there is a darker wisdom here. The ruler who masters faith does not merely enslave, he also protects himself from the chaos of reason. For reason is dangerous to rulers. Reason challenges, doubts, resists. If the people reasoned, they might overthrow him. But blind faith anesthetizes their doubts, turning them into loyal defenders of his throne. Thus Machiavelli teaches that faith is not only a weapon of control, it is a shield against rebellion. So long as the people believe, they will not rise. So long as they worship, they will not resist. The lesson, then, is not that faith itself is evil, but that the manipulation of faith is the surest path to power. The prince must never forget that men desire to believe, and that their belief can be shaped like clay. He must never be blinded by his own illusions, but use them with precision. For faith, once harnessed, can make men kill, die and suffer, all willingly, all proudly, all without question. And so we arrive at the lesson hidden beneath centuries of blood, obedience, and devotion. Faith, without reason, becomes the leader. The masses, intoxicated by belief, march willingly into their own ruin. They defend tyrants, excuse corruption, and sacrifice their very freedom, all in the name of blind loyalty. Yet for the cunning ruler, blind faith is treasure. It is the tool that binds armies tighter than chains, that silences dissent more effectively than swords, that makes men kill with pride and die with joy. To the manipulator, faith is not salvation, but strategy, not virtue but power. Understand this truth: the greatest prisons are not built of stone, but of conviction. The strongest tyrants are not feared, but worshipped. And the darkest price of blind faith is that men lose not only their freedom, but the will to even desire it. Remember, the world is not ruled by truth, it is ruled by belief, and those who master belief command everything.